Okay, in this video, I'm going to wrap up Chapter 7, and we left off with efficiency wages in the last video. These are wages that are paid above a market wage. You don't see this too often in the US. You do see it more frequently in some other countries like in Europe, but there are certain companies that pride themselves on paying an efficiency wage. For example, Costco pays an above market wage. In-N-Out, Chick-fil-A, they pay an above market wage. So what happens is if you have in our model down here, let's say an initial equilibrium in the marketplace of the demand for labor and the supply of labor, then this would be the wage, W1. So maybe In-N-Out could hire their workers at the market wage, just like McDonald's or Jack in the Box could hire at the market wage. Let's, for illustration, say that's $12 an hour. But In-N-Out, they decide that they want to pay an efficiency wage. So they're going to pay above $12. They're actually going to pay maybe $15 an hour. Well, what that is designed to do is to create more efficiency among their workers. That's why we call it an efficiency wage. It's efficient if the increased marginal revenue product exceeds the wage premium. So if In-N-Out pays $15 instead of $12, well, that's $3 more an hour. But if they're able to get $3 more an hour in productivity, then they've broken even. Preferably, they'd like to have $4 or $5 more in marginal revenue product by paying the worker $3 more. But at least they would need to get an increase in marginal revenue product equal to the increase in wage. And so the way that's represented in our model is the demand curve for the worker shifts up as the worker becomes more efficient, more productive. So again, if we start out here at $12, and let's say McDonald's and In-N-Out are both hiring at that rate, and then In-N-Out says, no, we're going to pay $15, but as a result of that, the workers become $3 more productive, then the demand curve shifts up. The whole demand curve shifts up by $3 because the demand curve is a marginal revenue product curve, and each worker is now producing $3 more. So it shifts up, which means at W2, we still have the same amount of employment. We're still demanding the same amount of workers at Q1, but now we're paying them more. If efficiency is enhanced, then the firm benefits. It lowers their turnover and shirking. Three things here to consider. First, by paying the premium, the efficiency wage, the company is paying a wage that's higher than competing jobs. So In-N-Out, by paying $15 an hour, is a better job than the alternative for the worker, which would be McDonald's paying $12 an hour. That makes In-N-Out look a lot better to the employee, and that improved perception of the employer presumably encourages more productivity. It encourages the worker to stay longer. They feel better about their company, feel like the company cares. The second thing to consider is it raises the cost of being terminated. The employee that loses their job at McDonald's at $12 an hour goes to Jack in the Box and gets a job at $12 an hour. But the employee that loses their job at In-N-Out at $15 an hour goes to McDonald's or Jack in the Box and gets a job for $12 an hour. So the cost of being terminated is higher for those employees getting an efficiency wage, which means that they're less likely to leave and they're less likely to shirk because they don't want to get terminated. It also increases the pool of competitors for the job. If you go back down here to our model, the initial equilibrium when we had a wage of $12 was right here, and the quantity supplied of workers was there according to the supply curve. But when In-N-Out comes along and pays an efficiency wage, moving the wage to W2, they actually attract workers. The supply goes up for their pool of workers. This increased supply is going to make the workers that are at In-N-Out feel more dispensable because there's a line of applicants waiting to take their job. That again encourages lower turnover and less shirking. This is pretty accurate. There's usually a much greater pool of applicants for getting a job at Costco or getting a job at In-N-Out than there would be for getting a job at McDonald's or Jack in the Box. Another thing to consider is the lower turnover that comes from efficiency wages often increases the return on the human capital investment that the firm makes. Recall that firms invest in general and specific training to get workers up to speed. But in order to get a return on that investment, they got to keep the worker for a minimum amount of time. So turnover is something that compromises that. So by providing an efficiency wage, they're more likely to retain those workers and recover their human capital investment. It also supports the idea that firms that do pay efficiency wages may be more likely to invest in training in their workers. If you go to work for Costco or In-N-Out, you could probably expect more opportunity for training and moving up than you might if you went to companies that don't pay that kind of efficiency wage, because those other companies are concerned that if they make that investment in you, you're just going to turn around and leave. I know In-N-Out in particular tries to promote from within at all levels. So that's an example of their efficiency wages keeping turnover low and justifying huge investments in human capital with their workers. The last thing I want to cover in this chapter is deferred pay contracts. This is a compensation system where the firm essentially defers pay for the worker into the future. And what this looks like is initially, when you get hired by the firm, you're paid a low wage. But then every year you're there, you're paid a higher wage, and then your highest wage would likely be when you retire. Take a look at this illustration down here. We've got the quantity of labor hours, and this would be lifetime labor hours in a job. And then you've got the wage rate and the marginal revenue product on the vertical. So let's assume, just for illustration, that over the lifetime of hours, marginal revenue product does not change. Just means that every year the worker is there, their productivity, their contribution to the firm is the same. I know that's not true, but it doesn't change the analysis if we make that assumption. What's going to happen is when a worker gets hired for a firm, they're going to get a low wage. In other words, they're going to be paid a wage well below their marginal revenue product. This difference when they first start working for the firm is beneficial to the company because the company is getting more value out of you than what they're paying you. And then every year you work, you're still generating the same amount of productivity, but you're getting paid more and more. And then let's say you start working at 25, right? So 25 years old here, and you're getting paid less than your productivity. But then at 40, you're now at a point where you're getting paid exactly what you're contributing to the firm. And then after 40, you are getting a wage that's greater than your contribution to the firm. So these deferred pay contracts are where companies are effectively getting more production from you than they're paying in the early years, and then you're getting more pay than your production in the later years. Hence, we have a deferred pay contract. This has a strong effect on turnover because every year that you're there, you're moving up in wage and getting closer and closer to that marginal revenue product that you're contributing. And then eventually you're getting paid well above that. So every year that you work for the company, you have a higher opportunity cost of leaving. Hence, people often stay with a company that offers this kind of pay schedule. Employees' relative value also improves with years of employment. You're rewarding employees with a higher wage the longer they stick around. So they start to feel better every year about their employer. That improved morale presumably helps with the overall efficiency and productivity of the worker. There are some issues. Firm costs increase if older workers are incentivized to delay retirement. Once you get past this point here, you're getting a higher wage and it's more than you're actually producing. So this is kind of the comfort zone for the worker. Go to work and get paid more than you're actually adding. That means a lot of older workers, they don't want to leave. They don't want to retire. The solution to this is to usually package a deferred pay contract with some sort of pension plan that will incentivize these older workers to eventually retire. Just say, well, yeah, I'm getting a high wage and it's more than I'm generating for the firm. I'm pretty comfortable when I go to work, but I could do almost as well if I left the company altogether and just took a pension or a retirement. More common in very large firms. The large firms are less likely to go bankrupt, so these younger workers, they have to be concerned that if they're getting paid below their productivity, in the early years. They're really doing that because they believe at some point in the future their job's going to get a lot better, right? They're trading off this when they're young for this when they're older. And they need to be assured that this is going to be available. That means they need to be assured that the firm is going to be around long enough to allow them to get those high wages down the road. It's less likely to terminate older workers to avoid higher pay in later years. Big companies, when they establish these kind of deferred pay contracts, want to send a message not only that they're going to be around a long time, but that they're not going to take that 40-year-old, let's say, right here, and the second that they start earning a wage above marginal revenue product, fire them. That young workers would not want to take the low wage below their productivity because there'd be no reward when they get to this kind of break-even point. So big companies oftentimes are better suited for these kind of deferred pay contracts because you got to get people to come to work and actually work for a lot less than their marginal revenue product. And that's not going to happen unless there's some payoff down the road. Now, what's an example of this? Well, you do see these kind of deferred pay contracts in a lot of professions, like higher level professions, accounting, attorneys, doctors, where you'll see these young people, they come out of maybe law school and they get paid a low wage. They go to work for a big law firm and they're paid very low compared to what they're generating for the firm. And they're sitting back and they're watching these older workers barely do anything that are earning a high wage, and they're just kind of hanging around the office, not doing anything. Well, the young person says, yeah, I'll take a low wage and I'll produce a lot for this company, but I want to be assured that over time, my wage is going to go up, and at some point, I'm going to be that old guy that gets to come in and sit around and not really produce much. So that's the type of situation where a lot of workers are attracted to deferred pay contracts. And like I said, it's very common in the professions where they'll work you to death in the early years, and then the payoff is down the road when you become a partner or you start to get those high incomes despite your really low productivity. Notice also that we're talking about implicit contracts here. Don't confuse implicit contracts with explicit contracts. Explicit contracts are where there is an actual agreement that pay is going to be deferred. If this were an explicit contract, the person that takes that job would sign a contract agreeing to a certain wage initially and then a certain raise every year for the rest of their career. But that's rare. And when we do see explicit contracts, it's usually union labor, and it's only for a year or two at a time, not for an entire lifetime. So these are implicit contracts, meaning that it's kind of this unwritten rule that you're going to make less when you start out than what you're producing, and then when you get older, you're going to get more than what you produce. But it's not something that's formal. It's not a contract that you could go to court and enforce. It's just implied. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for Chapter 7. I hope this helps. If you have questions, please let me know.